Welcome to EPG Padashala. I am Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar from School of Distance Education, University of Kerala. Today we will discuss Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, which comes in the paper 20th Century English Literature. Heart of Darkness, as everybody knows, is a phenomenal novel written by Joseph Conrad, which introduced some of the concepts related to modernism in English literature. So Joseph Conrad, who was born out of England, he was actually born in Ukraine in 1857, and his family, his father and mother, they were arrested as they fought against the invasion of Poland by Russia, Prussia and Australia. His father was arrested for his anti-Russian activities in 1861, followed by his mother. He was arrested in 1862. So actually Joseph Conrad became an orphan at a very early age, as he lost both his parents. And Conrad's interest in journeying or in travel actually was a result of his interest in novels. He read the novels of Charles Dickens and Captain Frederick Mayotette's adventurous novels, and these novels introduced a new world of adventures in front of him. And it was under the influence of these novels that he had the inclination to join the merchant navy. And he joined the French merchant navy in 1874, and after some time in 1886 he became a mariner. But actually his travel from France to England was because of his problems of adjustment with the French mariners, and eventually he became a citizen of England. And he was a steamer captain in 1890 in the Congo, and this experience actually moved him a lot, and the writing of the novel Heart of Darkness was a result of this shocking experience that he had in Congo. And after a few years he retired from sailing and became a full-time writer. So his experiences traveling to the Congo resulted in the novel Heart of Darkness. The Heart of Darkness is a novella which is a short novel or a long short story. The term novella is derived from the Italian term novella, which means new. Heart of Darkness is intended as a novella, and it presents one particular experience in the life of a person. It is not a kind of a realistic novel which presents the story of a man from the beginning to the end. It tries to present one particular experience in the life of a person and goes deep into that experience. The novel Heart of Darkness is a foundational novel of colonialism because it discusses the impact of colonialism in Africa in a very picturesque manner. It is true that Joseph Conrad was not a person who criticized the colonialists in the manner which was necessary, but at the same time we find the depiction of the disastrous experience of the African people, the blacks in Africa, as a result of colonial invasion in the novel. Even more significant is the way in which he breaks the narrative conventions of the Victorian novel, adopting a new style of writing, connecting the Victorian with the modernist narrative. So the novel The Heart of Darkness at the same time combines the values of the Victorian period as well as the modern period. So the novel Heart of Darkness, in every sense of the term, is a path-breaking novel which bridges the Victorian period with the modern period. The novel has different levels of meaning. It has a literal meaning as well as symbolic meanings. Literally, the novel explains the experiences of Marlowe in the dark continent that is Africa. But at a symbolic level, it also discusses the explorations of the human mind, the human psyche. So, at one and the same time, it is a novel that discusses the experiences of a journey through Congo and the experiences of a journey through the mind of man. The Congo River, which goes in a zigzag fashion, certainly is symbolic of the human mind, which also moves in a very zigzag fashion. So the novel to a great extent portrays the mind of man as well as the experiences of the African colonialism. The novel also has been subject for a film, Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The Congo is a Belgian colony in Africa in 1960s, and Congo was captured by the Belgian ruler King Leopold II and named it as État indépendant du Congo, and it refers to the Congo Free State. But in the novel, we find that Marlowe refers to Congo as a snake, and it presents the shape of the river looking like a snake. At the same time, the river is emblematic of the civilization and culture of Africa, which the whites failed to come to terms with. Post-colonialism is an academic and intellectual response to the cultural legacies of colonialism, and as a tool of interpretation, post-colonialism is used to analyze the texts from former colonies of Britain, France, etc. And what is discussed in these texts are the experience of colonialism and the way in which the white looked at the natives as the other. The famous theorists like Homi Bhabha, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and Edward Said tried to foreground the culture and civilization and the experiences of the colonized people, and they tried to interpret these texts from the point of view of the colonized. Post-colonial theory, which is widely different as far as these theories are concerned, now tries to read the texts from the point of view of the natives, and they tried to interpret the texts in a way which justifies the experiences of the natives rather than the whites. So in one sense, it is a kind of a reaction to the intellectual invasion of the colonial power over the natives, rather than a kind of a political movement against colonialism. So far we have been discussing the novel and its general features, and now we will look at the characters. Marlowe is the protagonist of the novel, and he is the narrator who presents before us the various scenes of Africa, which is shocking to the eye of a foreigner. Kurtz is another very important character. He is the chief of the inner station, and Kurtz, though a white man, has to a certain extent become one with the African culture. He looks at the world from a very different point of view. He is a very complex character who at one and the same time behaves as if he is part of the African natives, and at the same time he uses his influence to take away the riches of the nation. Then the general manager of the company, who is the chief agent of the company in Africa, is another very important character in the novel. The chief accountant, pilgrims, the Russian trader, helmsman, then Kurtz's African mistress, Kurtz's intendant, aunt, and Fresselven. They are the other important characters in this novel. As far as the story is concerned, it has two different aspects. One is Marlowe's narration of his experiences in Africa, and the other is Kurtz's story, which is to a certain extent an inner narrative within the novel. So Marlowe got a position in the company as a captain of the ship, and he travels to Africa, and he finds the white traders treating the African natives cruelly, and he feels pity for them. At the same time, he is also shocked by the violence of the natives, and he meets Kurtz in the inner station, and he has great desire to bring him back to Europe. And so finally he was able to bring Kurtz back to Europe. At the same time, we find that on the way, in the steamboat, he dies. Kurtz dies. So Marlowe returns to England as a changed man, and he was terribly shocked by the experiences in Africa. It was not just a mental shock, it was also a physical shock for him. And in England, he was nursed back to health. He meets Kurtz's intendant, the lady who was supposed to marry Kurtz, and she was still mourning for Kurtz. And Marlowe doesn't tell her about the real condition of Kurtz in Africa. So the story brings before us a kind of experience that Marlowe had during the early period of the colonial invasion of Africa. And the novel discusses some of the important themes like alienation, which is celebrated by the modernists in the novels that came after Heart of Darkness. Alienation certainly is one of the important themes that is discussed in the novel. In the beginning, we find that there is silence. The novel begins on the board of a ship, and there everybody is silent. And in the end also you find a silence. So the novel begins and ends in silence, and this indicates the kind of experience that Marlowe had in Congo. He was actually cut off from the humanizing influences of European civilization, and his experience in Congo actually raises questions in his mind about the worth of European civilization, and he exposes the thin layer that is the civilization as far as human beings are concerned. So his effort was to go into the darkness within his own mind, and that is unraveled through the novel. To a certain extent, this journey is also the journey undertook by Conrad himself, who tried to unravel his ambivalences as far as the colonial invasion of Europe is concerned. Racism is another important topic that is connected with this novel. Racism has become a very important topic of discussion in the contemporary period, but Heart of Darkness actually brings forward certain aspects of this experience in the novel. The novel presents the Africans as niggers, criminals, cannibals, and savages, and the natives are portrayed as inferior people when compared to the Europeans. The colonial prejudice towards the Africans is shared by the narrator as well. So the white man's innate right to conquer other nations is to a certain extent supported by the narrator. So Kurtz, who is the central figure in this novel, is worshipped as a god by the natives, and at the same time Kurtz observes that his aim in Africa is to exterminate all brutes. From this we understand how Kurds look at the natives, even though he is worshipped by them. So this colonial prejudice towards the natives is one of the elements of racism that we can find in this novel. On the other hand, the novel also tries to present the European efforts to civilize the natives. The so-called white man's burden is shared by Marlowe, the narrator. He looks at the natives as uncivilized people, and he considers his duty to civilize the natives. So this approach is purely another example of racism in this novel. Colonialism is at present discussed as part of literary studies as well as cultural studies, and post-colonial approach is one of the most influential approaches that we have in the contemporary literary studies. The Heart of Darkness is considered to be a kind of canonical text which can be used to discuss the post-colonial approach towards literature, because this particular novel discusses the European control and exploration of Africa, and it tries to portray the kind of experiences that natives had under colonial rule. So the colonial attempts to invade the nation and exploit the nation is clearly portrayed in this novel. Even though the narrator did not share many of the experiences of the natives, still it is very evident in this novel that colonialism has destroyed the culture, civilization, and the life of Africa in a very dangerous fashion. So far we have discussed the important themes in the novel. Now let us look at the structure of the novel, because the novel is also significant because of its structure. As I told you before, it is a kind of a bridge between the Victorian novel and the modern novel. The novel is divided into 3 chapters, and the 3 chapters discusses the kind of experiences of Marlowe, Kurtz, and again Marlowe back in England. There are 3 central characters in this novel. One is Marlowe, the other is Kurtz, and then the narrator. There are 3 stations mentioned in this novel: the outer station, the central station, inner station. So we can at least comment that it has a tripartite structure. And the novel, as far as the narrative is concerned, the novel is considered to be a frame narrative. A frame narrative is one in which there is a narrative within a narrative. It is a kind of a literary technique which enables the writer to present different perspectives within one story. So it is a story within a story. The first narrator sets the scene, and the first narrator in this novel is Marlowe. He introduces the second narrator, and that is Kurtz. So the rest of the novel is about Kurtz. So the novel has a circular structure. So at one and the same time, it adopts the traditional kind of narrative, realistic narrative, and at the same time, it also presents the complexities, the complex pattern of the experiences of the characters through an inner narrator. So an outer story and an inner story helps the novelist to present the complexity of modern life, while at the same time connecting himself with the traditional kind of narrative. The major motif of the novel is darkness. The title itself presents the darkness as an image. And the darkness in this novel is not only the darkness connected with the continent Africa, that is, Africa is considered to be a dark continent, that is referring to the lack of education, lack of civilization, and lack of knowledge, etc. At the same time, the darkness also refers to the primitive character of Africa. So the African continent is presented here as the dark continent in one sense, and in another sense it also refers to the darkness of the mind of the colonialists, because we find that though they are presented as civilized people, they try to use violence and horror to capture the money and wealth of Africa. So that refers to the darkness of the mind of the colonialists. So darkness as a motif actually refers to different aspects of the experience described in the novel Heart of Darkness, and it is a kind of a personification of the unconscious. Another important topic that has to be discussed in connection with the novel is the theme of quest. Marlowe's journey into the dark continent can also be seen as a quest towards an unknown land. It is a literal journey to the jungle, to the dark continent, and to the inner landscape. So just as we see in many of the novels of quest, it also symbolically refer to the journey of man into his own unconscious. So we find that Marlowe refers to his associates in the ship as pilgrims. So that kind of reference indicates the double meaning that it has. It is at one and the same time a journey, physical journey into the dark continent, and at another level it is a journey into the mind of man. Just like in other quest novels, we find lot of impediments on the way, and finally the narrator overcomes all those impediments and comes back to his own native land. Being a canonic text, the Heart of Darkness has been interpreted in wide variety of ways by critics. One of the most important interpretations is by the post-colonial writers, and they look at Heart of Darkness as a novel that looks down upon the African people. They allege that Joseph Conrad has a racist view towards the blacks. So actually it was considered to be a novel that looked at the African people as the other, the antithesis of European civilization. The Africans are the uncivilized, uneducated, uncultured other to the educated, civilized and cultured European people. Another important interpretation of this novel is related to the moral ambiguity of the white. Actually, the title of the novel, as we discussed earlier, presents the darkness of the mind. And the darkness can be connected with the sin and the idea of redemption is also connected with this novel. So the expedition of the pilgrims through the dark jungle symbolizes the journey of the pilgrims through the darkness of the mind, and when they finally come back to their own land, it is actually a sign of the redemption. So it can also be seen as a novel that depicts the conflict between the good and the bad, and from looking from a moral point of view, it presents the moral ambiguity of the white in relation to the experience of colonialism and how they try to overcome this ambiguity. So Conrad's attempts from that point of view is to come out of that moral ambiguity that the Europeans faced during the imperialist ages. So far we have discussed the various aspects of the novel, the theme, the various topics and the various interpretations of the novel, and the title and its relevance, and the way in which it has revolutionized the writing of the novel. And for further information, you can look at some of the texts mentioned in the further reading part. You can also find a lot of materials on the novel from the various sites mentioned in the section, and it is always important to look at the novel from a new perspective if it is possible for you. So the Heart of Darkness is a text which is so rich because of the various interpretations that are possible in the text. So as such, we have to understand the text from very different points of view. So thank you very much.